Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's video, I will show you how to set up single sign-on for your Spring Boot application with Microsoft Azure. Let's see the demo of the final result. Let's start the project. The project is started at port 8080. Open the browser and go to the URL. This is localhost 8080. My application found that I was not logged in, so it redirects me to Microsoft login page. Here, I am providing my username and password. After the login was successful, it redirects me to my Spring Boot application. Here on the home page, I am showing some information of the user that I have received from Microsoft. This is what we are going to build. Now, let's move to the main part of the tutorial. Before making our hands dirty with code, let's break the whole thing into small and simpler steps. It will make it easier to understand the process and simplify the development. For implementing single sign-on, first thing we will need is the Spring application. We need to configure the Spring Boot so that Spring can understand that we are going to use Microsoft Azure as our application's authentication server. Next, we need to register our application with Microsoft Azure and get our client ID and client secret. Now, the list of Spring Boot dependencies that we need for our project. The most important dependency that we will need is Spring Boot Starter Auth to Client. In this library, all the necessary code that we will need in our project is defined. This makes our life a lot easier. I'll also need a couple of some other dependencies like Spring Web and TimeLeaf. Why? Because I am going to expose some endpoints and also output some HTML in the browser. Now, let's create the project. For this, I will use my favorite Spring Initializr tool. Just search for Spring Initializr. Here is the first result that I will need. That is start.spring.io. Open the link. Here we need to configure our project. First, make sure you have selected the Maven project. The language is Java. Select latest version of Spring Boot. At the time of this recording, it is 3.2.2. Packaging is jar. The Java version is 17 because it is minimum required version of Spring Boot 3. Now we need to modify metadata. Give it a group name. Change the artifact name. Spring Microsoft SSO. Give it a description. Now it's time to add dependency. Click on this Add Dependency button. From the model window, search for Web. Select it. Again, Add Dependency. This time, search for TimeLeaf. And finally, New Dependency. Search for Auth to Client. Add this. That's all the dependency we need for now. Let's generate the project. Click this Generate button. The project will be generated and downloaded. Open the project in your favorite IDE. I have opened the project in IntelliJ IDE. I am using the ultimate version, but if you are comfortable with Eclipse or Spring Tool Suite or any other IDE, go ahead and use that. Now let's explore the pom.xml file. POM stands for Project Object Model. It holds the information of the project. This is the Spring Boot version. This is the group ID of our project. And this is our artifact ID. And here are our dependencies. Now I will configure this project for Microsoft Azure. We can provide our configuration in application.properties file in the source, in the src resources folder. I will rename this application.properties to application.yml. This is for representation YML. I really like this representation style. If you are comfortable with application.properties, you can use that. But for following this tutorial, it is better to use YML. Now the first property we'll need is Spring, Security, OAuth 2, Client. Then we need to set the provider. Our provider is Azure. I need to give the issuer URI. For Azure, it is https login.microsoftonline.com/your tenant ID/v2. We will get the tenant ID from the Microsoft Azure portal. I will show you how to get it when we register our application with Microsoft. For the time being, just provide a placeholder. Another thing is that you need to take care of the indentation. This is important. If the indentation is wrong, then the system will not work. We need to give registration property. The indentation level must be the same as provider. Here we will need the ID of the client registration. It is Azure-dev. We need to mention the provider as Azure. The client ID, we will get it from Azure portal. For the time being, just add a placeholder. Then need to provide the client secret. The next property is scope. Here I will provide the scope for OpenID, email and profile. Again, take care of the indentation. Now it's time to register our app in Azure. Go to portal.azure.com. You need to have your own Azure ID. If you do not have, go ahead and sign up for new one. Log in using your email address and password in this Azure portal dashboard. Scrolling down, go to app registration. From here, new registration. Give it a name. For the supported account type, in my case, it is the first option, that is account in this organization directory only. Scroll down, choose redirect URL, select web. Here in the input box, provide redirect URL. In our case, it is http localhost 8080/login/OAuth2/code/ Azure-dev. As my code will run on my local server, so I mentioned it localhost. In your case, replace this with your domain name. Click on register. Our new app has been created. This is our tenant ID. Copy this one and paste it in our Spring Applications issuer ID. Replace this tenant ID with the actual tenant ID from Microsoft Azure. Now we need to get the client ID from Azure portal. Here is the client ID. Copy it and paste it into our application's client ID property. Remove this placeholder. Paste the client ID. Now we need to get client secret. Similarly, from the Azure portal, here we need to generate the client secret. Click this link, add certificate or client secret. New client secrets. Give it a description. Set when the secret code would expire. I am selecting 180 days. Click add. This is our client secret. Copy the value of the secret code. Paste it in our configuration file. Now let's create an endpoint to handle the home URL. To do this, we will need a controller. Inside Java, root package, create a new package, name it controller. Inside the controller package, create a new class, IndexController. Annotate it with controller. Give request mapping annotation. URL is the root URL. Inside controller class, add get mapping, create a new public method, index. It accepts model. This is from org.springframework.ui. This also accepts authentication object. Name it user. Inside this method, add model attribute. Model dot add attribute. Attribute name is user. Pass our user here. This method returns the name of the HTML file that we will render in the browser. I made a small mistake. It will not REST controller. It will be controller. Inside resources, template directory, create a new HTML file, index.html. Now, as we are using TimeLeaf, we need to add some namespace here. First one is XML namespace equals w3.org/199/xhtml. Another namespace that is specific to TimeLeaf, xmlns equals timeleaf.org. Change the title. This HTML is showing error. Here I have made a mistake. Here should be th tag. With this, the error is gone. Now inside the body, add h1 tag. Inside hello, span tag. Here I will display the name of the user. We passed our user data in this HTML through model. So we're able to use it in this TimeLeaf template. To access it, we'll need to use TimeLeaf specific notation inside span th:\text. Here to access the variable, we need to give $, curly braces, inside curly braces, user.name. This will basically display the user's name in the browser. Now let's start the server and check it in the browser. There is an error. I have provided wrong issuer. Okay, let's open application.yml file. Here is the issuer. This will be version 2.0. Now let's start the project again. This time successfully started. Let's try to access it from the browser. It redirects us to Microsoft login page. Actually, let's log out from Azure portal and forget email. Now let's try to log in. Cancel this. It redirects us to our Spring Boot default logout error page. Let's update the URL. Localhost 8080. Now it redirects us to Microsoft login page. Provide our email, password, sign in. Need to verify. Microsoft have sent a verification code in my email. Let's verify it. Here it is showing the window with some summary of the permission. This is app name from Microsoft Azure. This is the scope that our application will allow to access. Review this, then go ahead and accept. It validates our login and redirects us to our Spring Boot root URL. Here is the name showing from Microsoft Azure. It actually is some kind of IDE. Let's show actual name instead of this code. How can we get the name? Let's explore. Go to the project. I am going to run this in debug mode. In this IndexController, let's add a breakpoint in this line. Run the project in debug mode. Click on this bug icon. The server is started on debug mode. Open the browser. Refresh the page. Execution stopped on the breakpoint. Here is the user data. Expand it. There is principal, user info, claims. Here is the name. So we need to place this name in our HTML. To do this, open application.yml. After issuer URI, add user name attribute. We found our username attribute was name. Now restart the server, reload the page. Here is our name showing. It's looking ugly. Let's add some style to this page. For styling, I will use a lightweight CSS library named Pico. Search for Pico CSS. This is our CSS library. Click on Get Started. Scroll down. Here is the CDN link. we are going to use this. Copy this and paste it into the head section of our HTML. Now after the name, I want to show some of the other properties of the user that we are able to fetch from Microsoft. Add a beer tag, H2 heading, user info. Adding a table, table head, I will have two header columns, attribute and value. Now table body, add a row. The first attribute is name, value is user.name. Another row, attribute is class. Now value is user.principal.class. Another row, attribute is authenticated. Value is user.authenticated. Another row, client registration ID. Value is user.authorized client registration ID. Let's check on the browser. Restart. Refresh the page. Here is the data. Let's make the theme dark. Now add a new row. Now here I will show the authority. The authority comes as a list. So we need to loop through the list of these authorities. We can do this using th each authority from user.authorities. The first column is granted authority. Add span tag, th text. Here I want to show simple authority name. So authority.class.simple name. Another column for showing authority, th text authority.authority. Restart the server, refresh the page. Here is the other data. Now it's time to implement logout. Let's add a logout button in our HTML. After this user info, add an anchor tag, URL is logout. Now let's start the project. Refresh the browser. Here is our logout. Click. Confirm logout. Done. We have successfully logged out from our application, but here is one problem. Let's remove login from the URL. See, we are logged in again. It did not ask for username and password. It can cause a big problem. Suppose you logged out of your system and went outside for a while. A bad guy opened your PC and tried to access this application. You will be able to access it without needing any credentials. This is a security threat. So, how we can solve this? Before showing how to solve this, let me tell you why this is happening. Whenever you try to log out of the Spring Boot application, it clears your session from the application context. But it did not inform the Microsoft server that the user has logged out, so please invalidate the session from your end. So there is a global session for the user remains in the Microsoft server. Whenever someone tries to access the application sends a login request to Microsoft Azure. Microsoft finds the user is previously logged in, so it returns the token. To solve this issue, we need to add a mechanism to send logout request to the Azure authentication server. Thanks to Spring and Microsoft, both provides an excellent solution to achieve this. In Spring Boot, we need to create a custom logout handler, where this logout will be processed. We can inform our Spring Boot application about this custom logout handler from the security filter chain. So we need to configure our Spring security. So let's create a new class. I am going to place it inside config package. Name it SecurityConfig. Annotate it with configuration. I want to enable web security. Inside the class, add a bin. Security filter chain. It accepts HTTP security and throws an exception. In this method, I need to provide a couple of configurations. First, I want all of the requests should be authenticated. So return http.authorize HTTP request inside parentheses lambda expression auth arrow auth dot any request dot authenticated. Then after closing the parentheses dot logout, here we will provide our logout handler inside parentheses lambda expression logout arrow logout dot logout handler. Here we need to pass our logout handler. I will create this handler shortly. After this, we need to add auth to login. This should use the default. Finally, build. Now let's create our logout handler. Create a new class inside the config package. Name it custom logout handler. It extends security context logout handler. We need to override a method. Right click, generate, override methods, search for logout. We need to override this method. Let's move this parameter to a new line so that you can read it. Now, here is what I will do. Remember our goal? We'll send a request to Microsoft to log out of our user session. Also log out user from our application. So there are steps we are going to follow. First of all, we need to create a logout URL. To do this, we need to get logout endpoint of the Microsoft Azure authentication server. Then generate the logout URL. After that, send the request to that URL. Now let's get the logout endpoint. Microsoft Azure uses the standardized, well-known OpenID configuration URL to provide OpenID Connect configuration details for secure sign-ins. Let's check it. From application.yml, copy this issuer URI. After that URI, add /well-known/OpenID configuration. Here is the list of OIDC configuration details for Microsoft Azure. Here is our issuer URI, and here is end session endpoint. We will use it for end our user session. Back to IDE. In the custom logout handler, to get the configuration data that we have just seen, we need to inject a dependency, that is client registration repository. Generate a constructor with this. Inside logout method, client registration repository dot find by registration ID. Here we need to provide registration ID. We can get it from our application.yml file. Here is our registration ID. Copy this and paste it. Then get provider details, get configuration metadata. To form the metadata, we need to get logout endpoint. Let's copy the property name from the browser and paste it here. Save this to the logout endpoint variable. Cast it with string. Now it's time to generate logout URL. A new variable logout URI. This equals, here we'll need to get help from our URI component builder. We need to initialize it using our logout endpoint, then encode it and transform it into URI string. Our logout URL is ready. It's time to send the request. We can do this using response.send redirect. Pass our logout URI. We need to surround it with try catch block. I forgot to add annotation here. Give component annotation. Now let's inject this custom logout handler into our security config. Final field, custom logout handler. Generate a constructor with this field. Now let's start the server. Open the browser, our application tab, refresh. Now click logout, confirm. It redirects to Microsoft logout window, logout from our account. So we are logged out. Now let's try to access our application. Sure enough, it redirects back to Microsoft login page. And that is for our tutorial. I enjoyed working with it. Hopefully you will too. I'll be back with another soon. Till then, happy coding.